What's going on, guys? Welcome back to Geek Culture Explained. My name is Rob, and in this video, I'm going to reveal to you guys how it is that I know the Eternals are going to introduce mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and how the Marvel Cinematic Universe is going to use the introduction of mutants in the Eternals to introduce the X-Men later on. And in this whole process, I'm going to blow your mind. So how are the Eternals going to introduce mutants into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? Well, we've done this before, so I'll give you guys a quick and dirty explanation here. When the Celestials show up on Earth in the early days, yes, they create the Eternals, which is basically what humans are capable of if their genes are pushed to the absolute extreme, the peak of human potential, which is the ability to tap into cosmic energy. They also create the Deviants when they destabilize their genes and create unchecked mutations with no one's guess on what kind of mutations they're going to get. The third group had their genes modified so that at a future point in time, powers would develop. That's where mutants come from. The role of the Eternals is to protect humans from the Deviants. Now, with that out of the way, let's blow your mind with some really cool stuff. So do you guys remember in Captain America the First Avenger when we had an organization called the SSR, the Strategic Scientific Reserve, which was founded by Howard Stark, Peggy Carter, and Chester Phillips, played by Tommy Lee Jones? And remember how towards the end of that movie that we had Arnim Zola, who was rolled into the SSR to basically work as their scientific guy who could help them find a way to control the Tesseract so they could defeat Hydra? And remember in Captain America the Winter Soldier when Arnim Zola revealed that Hydra had been secretly regrowing inside of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Arnim Zola was the biggest reason why that happened in the first place? All that's super important. Why? Because in Marvel Comics there's an organization called Weapons Plus. Weapons Plus was a joint venture between Canada's Department H and the United States CIA. And the whole idea behind this was to basically create more Captain Americas, because Steve Rogers was believed to have been dead when he was actually frozen in a block of ice. And so the result of this is that you had all kinds of different experiments here. Technically, it was called Weapon 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Kind of a fun fact here, Captain America was Weapon 1, also known as Project Rebirth. Weapons 2 through 9 gave us a whole bunch of different things. One of these guys was a person by the name of Frank Simpson. Does that not sound familiar to you? Frank Simpson appeared in Jessica Jones. He was the guy who would pop those pills to amp himself up and bring himself back down again. Kind of a cool character. No idea if he's going to stay in continuity anymore. But then we get to Weapon 10. The importance behind Weapon 10 is that in the 1960s in Marvel Comics, you had a group called Team X, and Team X worked for the CIA through Weapons Plus. And the whole purpose behind this is that Team X would basically topple governments, take out anybody who was a political opponent to American capitalism. They were basically an assassination or a Black Ops wet work team. Now, a few of these members you've heard of, some of them you haven't. The two that you have heard of are Sabretooth and Wolverine. The other two that you've never heard of are Mastodon and Silver Fox, and I guess you could consider Maverick if you want to. Doesn't really matter. Those last three don't really have an important place in this. Wolverine is really the most important here, because ultimately word reached the ears of Weapons Plus that Wolverine had a healing factor. And so what Weapons Plus did is they brought him in as the 10th iteration of the Weapons Plus program, also known as Weapon X. Now, the importance behind this is that this is how Wolverine became Wolverine. Now let's move away from the main Marvel Universe here for a second, and let's go to a line of comics issued by Marvel in the year 2000 called The Ultimate Comics. Now the reason why this matters is because the Ultimate Universe is basically what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is based off of. That and a universe called Earth 98, which is where superheroes age in real time. But the important thing here is that the Ultimate Universe is the most significant thing when it comes to putting mutants into the MCU. Why is that the case? Because in the Ultimate Universe, the origin of mutants was such that basically James Howlett was taken by Canada to create a new iteration of a super soldier. During the attempt to turn James Howlett into a super soldier, they discovered a hidden gene, and when it was activated, he ended up developing a healing factor. Following that, the ability to activate those genes was synthesized, spread across the world, and then what do you know? You have mutants. Now, let's tie all this together and create a cohesive timeline on how mutants are going to appear in Eternals, running all the way up to the appearance of the X-Men and the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the modern day. So, start with the Eternals. Celestials show up on Earth. Celestials modify the genes of early man. Some of those individuals' genes manifest at a future point in time. They're mutants. They just stay there for a long time. Nobody ever really develops any powers. Nobody ever really becomes special. They're just people going around and living their lives. Fast forward to the death of Captain America, or the perceived death of Captain America at the end of Captain America the First Avenger. That when Arnim Zola is brought in, Arnim Zola starts regrowing Hydra. Hydra wants to create new Captain Americas, but unlike Steve Rogers, they want to create individuals who are loyal to Hydra, so that Hydra can basically solidify itself as a global threat, possibly even conquer the world proper. In order to do that, they have to do it secretly. One, because the general public won't be too keen on a government-sanctioned intelligence organization creating super soldiers, and two, no one's supposed to know that Hydra exists. So they create Weapons Plus in secret, and they basically start going through and taking people, kidnapping them, or even using animals like they did in the comics, and trying to create super soldiers. Following this, we go into the 1960s in the Marvel Cinematic Universe during the height of the Cold War, and we basically have James Howlett, and possibly even Sabretooth if you want to, who are working for Team X, which is secretly an agent of Hydra, and they're carrying out missions on Hydra's behalf, all the while having no idea that's the case. They're military guys. They take their orders, they implement their orders, they don't ask questions. Now, ultimately, Hydra realizes how effective Team X is, and they say, hey, maybe these guys would make great super soldiers. Maybe we can find a way to duplicate the super soldier serum from Steve Rogers. We'll put it in them, and then we'll have like a Black Ops team that can do stuff that Captain America could do, and imagine how effective they would be. Now, along the way, Hydra realizes that he's got a secret gene, the gene that was put in his body by the Celestials during the Eternals. And so they say, okay, cool, we're basically gonna activate this gene just to see what happens. And they realize he has a healing factor. The other part of this is they take the ability to activate those genes and they hand it over to their scientists on the off chance that maybe there's more than one person out there that has this kind of gene. And even if James is unique and nobody out there has secret genes, perhaps they can find a way to modify the activation process to give people powers. And so following that, the big question is, what do we do with this guy? Enter Myron McClane. In Marvel Comics, Myron McClane was a metallurgist that worked for the US government. The reason why he's important is because in Marvel Comics, because Captain America had helped the Wakandans during World War II, they gave him a little shard of vibranium. He went back to the US government and said, make a shield out of this. The government said, okay, cool. They handed the shard of vibranium over to Myron McClane and they said, make a shield out of this. And Myron McClane said, cool. The problem is he fell asleep halfway through the experiment. When he woke up, he had this shield which was composed of an indestructible metal. Come to find out, it was basically vibranium and iron. But ultimately, he tried to find a way to duplicate the shield. While he wasn't able to create the exact material that Captain America's shield is made out of, he did discover a different metal instead. Dun, dun, dun. Adamantium. And so maybe you have some situation where Myron McClane is a metallurgist working for Hydra, trying to find a way to create a more durable metal than vibranium, possibly even trying to find a way to create more vibranium. Whatever the case is, he ends up creating adamantium instead. Hydra realizes how durable this adamantium is. They bond it to Wolverine's skeleton, boom, now you have Wolverine. Now, as far as activating the rest of the mutant population across the world, you just tie that into the events of Infinity War and Avengers Endgame. And all you say is it's just a genetic response, right? That when there was a huge amount of people who just vanished, maybe those individuals who disappeared, when they snapped back, some of those individuals' genes popped into motion. They weren't supposed to activate, but the process of being dusted and then being recreated just kind of jarred their genealogical structure. The result is that their X gene activated prematurely. And then what do you know? We've got mutants in existence. But again, all this is just my thoughts on this, just a theory that I'm putting out there. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments section, and I will catch you all later. Peace.